Hi, welcome. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications. And today we're interviewing a former middle school math teacher at West Bloomfield Middle School and current math teacher at South High School named Mr. Justin Baker. How are you doing today?
I'm so good. I'm so glad to be doing this with you. I've heard and watched all of your interviews and whatnot, so this is really fun being on this side of things.
Thank you. Glad you could join. What is your schedule like when at work?
So when I was at West Bloomfield, the teachers had to get there about 7:50 a.m. was when our contract time started. Students were kind of out of the lunchroom or kind of, able to go to the classrooms and whatnot at 8 a.m. And then homeroom, our first period of the day, we called it advisory, but most places will call that homeroom. We started at 8:20. And then so I had homeroom, and then I had second, third, and fourth hour, which I taught sixth grade math. And so it was the same lesson for all three of those classes. Then I had my lunch, which was great. And then I taught my fifth and sixth hour, which was that same sixth grade math. And then my eighth hour, no, pardon me, sorry, my seventh hour of the day, I taught what was called math lab, which that was it was an elective, so students could choose to take it, but it was only available to some students who knew that they needed a little bit of extra math help. And we would go through kind of like either more in depth of the lesson that we went through that day, or maybe we would look ahead at things for the next day, or just practice some other skills that we might need some extra help with. Then we had our eighth hour homeroom advisory at the end of the day, and that was it. So I actually didn't have a prep this past year. So I taught all through the day, but it was great.
When did you start working at WBMS?
So I graduated from Ohio State in 2019 in May. And then honestly, West Bloomfield was my first ever interview for a teaching job, and it was my last interview until I left West Bloomfield 4 years later. So I started, I believe it would be August of 2019. So my first year teaching was actually the year of COVID. So very interesting first year.
When did you hear that you got the job at South High School?
So I believe it was midday, where I actually came down here. So I'm in my apartment now in Ohio in Columbus, which we had gotten um a few weeks prior to when my interviews and stuff were, because my wife's job, she started at the beginning of June. So we had to kind of get this ball rolling before we were even out of school for the summer. So I came down mid-May. And I stayed the night here. And then I believe it was a Thursday. I had two interviews. I had one for South High School where I'm at now, and I had one for a different school. And I got the call that, I interviewed and whatnot, and it went well, it went great. And then on my drive home, so like maybe 4 or 5 o'clock that night, they had called and they had offered me the position.
What was it like to be applied to be a teacher at all the places you've applied?
Yeah, yeah. So interviewing, I think, has been it's I'm gonna contradict myself. It can be really fun, but at the same time, it's pretty it can be maybe stressful might not be the right word, but frustrating. Um, and I say fun because I'm a teacher. I love being a teacher. I love what I do. I take a lot of pride in what I do. And when you're interviewing at schools, it's other people who also love education asking me questions about education. I mean, Max, to put it similarly, if someone else was interviewing you, asking you questions about why do you do interviews, what are your interviews like, where you could talk about that all day, right? Because you enjoy doing it. So it's kind of fun to it's almost like you get to brag about yourself a little bit. And so I think it was really fun in that aspect. But then there's other times where I had a few interviews where I didn't end up getting the job, where I knew it wasn't because they didn't like me or it wasn't because I wasn't qualified, but they just had someone else interview who they thought was a better fit. And that's just kind of one of those things that as you get older, that's what happens sometimes, and that's okay.
What was the actual process like? Like from the time you applied or how?
Yeah. So schools, at least in, I can speak for us, we're in Michigan, and then I applied here in Ohio. They have a similar process where a lot of times they'll use what's called a consortium. And so a consortium, to put it in perspective, West Bloomfield is part of what we call Oakland County, right? That's the county that West Bloomfield's in. So they had what was called an Oakland County Schools Consortium, where basically I fill out all of the typical interview things about like who I am, where I went to college, what my license is for, all of that normal stuff that you would fill out anyways, except what was nice was I filled out Oakland County stuff and then any job posted in Oakland County. So that would include, let's say West Bloomfield's in there, Bloomfield Hills is part of that, Waterford, if there's any openings in any of those schools, I just had to click one little button, like apply, 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 instead of having to put it in for Waterford School District, or instead of having to fill all that in just for West Bloomfield School District. So that was kind of the same process I went through here in Ohio. I applied to, there's like more counties or more like individualized, where maybe one school district will just have a consortium for them, and then a different consortium. But what's really nice is the software that they use is like the same throughout all of them. So once you fill in one, you can kind of transfer it over to others without having to fill in every last detail again. Still have to re-upload a lot of documents and whatnot, but it is a relatively painless process if you're willing to sit there and spend like, okay, I'm going to do 4 hours. I'm going to do this school, this school, this school, and this school. So yeah.
And then once that goes well, then they contact you saying they want to do the interview.
And so then I will say one of the frustrating parts about that is, I'll just use West Bloomfield as an example. Let's say it's Tuesday, June 1st, right? Or just it's June 1st. And I look at West Bloomfield and they don't have any math openings. They don't have any middle school math openings. So obviously I'm not going to apply because there's not a position for me to apply to. But then, for all we know, 2 days later, they might have a posting. So I kind of, you as the person who's applying to these jobs, you need to be willing to recheck, like, does West Bloomfield have any openings? Does Waterford have any openings? Does Livonia have any openings? And just kind of recheck almost every day to see if there's openings or not.
How many rounds of interviews did you have to go through for West Bloomfield and then Ohio?
So for West Bloomfield, I actually, I'd say it was technically just one. Well, no, I guess there's 2 rounds is what we'll call it. So the first round was with Ms. Hughes, our principal. It was with Ms. Graff, our assistant principal. And then we also had some extra people in there. So when I applied to West Bloomfield, I was applying for a math and science position. So they were looking to hire one teacher who could do both of those subjects. So we had our principal, we had our assistant principal, and then we had Miss Fellman, who and she was the math department chair. Like she's in charge of all the math teachers during meetings and whatnot. And then Miss Belli was there as well, because at the time she was our science department chair as well. And then I believe the only other person there was, her name was Miss McCormick. I'm not sure if you know her. She's awesome. She's like one of my best friends. And I think she was in there because she ended up being my mentor teacher once I got hired there. So I think no matter who this teacher that they hired, Miss McCormick was going to be the mentor who worked with them over the next few years to make sure everything's good, like to know, do you know how Power School works? Do you know how our schedule works? All of those things. So she was in that interview as well. So it started where they went around the table and pretty much asked a bunch of questions. What would you do if a student did this? Or let's say a student's adult at home, they email you and they're frustrated about this, just kind of asking teaching philosophy questions. And then after that, I got up and I went and I had to teach a lesson to, it was Miss McCormick's homeroom class. So I had to teach a lesson to her class that I had prepared ahead of time, which that's pretty normal. I had interviews here where I taught lessons as well. But I will say that when I did that interview and that lesson that I had to teach to those students, it was in the middle of their finals. So they took a final for one class, then they had their homeroom for, I think it was like a 30-minute block, and then they had their other final that day. So during that 30-minute block, I got to teach students a math lesson. while they were in between their taking their final exams and their big tests at the end of the year. So I don't think they appreciated that too much, but they were all great. It went, obviously it went well because I ended up working there. So yeah.
What inspired you to be a teacher?
So I would say I had a really, really good high school experience. I loved high school. And I know, like with my group of friends, that was not the case for all of my friends. I had some friends who really, really didn't like school and they didn't like having to come every day and they didn't like their classes and whatnot. And what I realized was that I really liked high school because I had a teacher who really, really cared about me. They came to my wrestling meets when I was in high school. They asked me questions about how life was, not just this class and this homework and this test. They really cared. And so I knew I liked school because of that teacher. And my friends didn't have teachers like that, so they didn't like school. So I kind of took it almost as okay, so I think I want to be a teacher because I want to be the person who gives students something to look forward to. They might not like math, it might not be their favorite subject, that's okay. But they know when they come through my classroom doors that they're in a safe space, and also that I, as an adult, really care about them. And I try to show that by going to their sports games. I went to the musical at the middle school every year that it was there. I have been to pretty much every band and choir and strings concert since I started working at West Bloomfield because I want to show the kids that I care.
How did you choose the subjects you wanted to teach?
So when I was in college, like I said, I went to Ohio State. I originally wanted to do high school math. I really like math because I think it's one of those things where um, science is very like, here's the things and here's why those things are, and then kids can still be like, I don't really get it. Where with math, I think it's very concrete as far as when we're multiplying numbers, right? We have 5 groups of 7, so that adds up to 35, and we can see and we can show that in a few different ways. So to kind of help with that, also I was good at math. I love to read. I just finished another book today. I think I'm at like 17 books this year so far since January 1st.
You have a goal?
No, I don't have it. My goal is to my goal a few years ago was to read more, and that's just kind of been, I think my book number I was at last year was like 22, and so read more than that, and I'm on track so far. I should be fine. But I knew with English and language arts comes commas and apostrophes and different, adjectives, adverbs, all that stuff. And I know a lot of kids end up not liking reading because of those things. And I didn't want to be the reason kids don't like to read. And I'm not saying that's what ELA teachers do by any means. For me, reading was more of like a hobby and something that I enjoyed and not something that I wanted to teach. And social studies, I'm just bad at history. I know history is important, but it was never really my subject in school. I was always a math science person. So to go back to your original question, I started as a high school math person. And then I ended up changing to middle school. And as a middle school teacher in the program I was in, at least, you had to pick 2 subjects. So I picked math and science because they kind of go hand in hand.
What is the easiest thing about your job?
Oh boy, the easiest thing. I think I kind of talked about this in my interviews with different schools as well. I'd say maybe not the easiest thing, but the thing that I'm most proud of is my ability to build relationships with my students, build relationships with my coworkers, and just kind of like be my authentic self with them. And I think that that's a reason why I've been successful teaching, and why I've enjoyed teaching for the most part for these past 4 years is because um, I get to model for my students, like, hey, this is who I am. Like, I'm not putting on an act for you. I'm not doing a song and dance. If I'm having a bad day, I let them know, like, hey, I have a headache today, or I didn't sleep very well last night. And I think that gives students permission to kind of be themselves and show me really who they are as well. So I'd say that's been one thing that I've really, really enjoyed about teaching and working with students.
What is the hardest thing about your job?
um, the hardest thing about our job, so I would say, I'm going to quote Mr. Inch. I don't know if you ever had Mr. Inch. He's a science teacher
But I
at,
know of him.
yes, yes. So for your viewers, he's a science teacher at our middle school. And he's been teaching for a while, and he's really, really great at what he does. And one morning, him and I, we were both in the copy room together, and he said to me, we were talking about summers off and people's perception of like, well, those teachers, they get the summer off. And Mr. Inch, he said, and I'll always remember, he said, we might get summers off, but we do a year's worth of work in those 9 months. And I think that's really, really true. One thing that's hard about teaching is the time management of it all, because we are in front of students, we're teaching all day, and then we get home and we have to have a lesson prepared for the next day, and if we have anything to grade, and there's students, adults are emailing us, or school emails, or just random other to-do tasks that we have to do. So just trying to keep all of that balanced, and also like, I don't want to come home from work and work until 9 p.m. just to go to bed to have to do it again the next day. So I'd say that's probably one of the harder parts, is just staying on top of it all.
What is your favorite thing about your job?
But I'd say my favorite thing about my job is definitely it's the students. I laugh every single day. You know, there's even if you have a tough class, you know, that's harder or more frustrating, there is a redeeming moment at least every day between you and one student, or seeing students interact, or having that aha moment. And I'll tell another really quick story. I remember when I was student teaching, I don't remember what it was, but I had a bad day. And I was texting my, at the time, girlfriend, now my wife, about it, and saying like, oh, today has sucked. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to call you and just like decompress and vent about it. And so I called her on my drive home, and we talked as I drove. Um, and I get through all of my like, this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And at the end, she didn't say anything. And I was like, hello. And she's like, sorry, I thought there was more things, because as you told me all of those, you laughed the entire time. You know, it was like, this kid, he drove me crazy. He was doing blah, 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 blah. But I'm laughing the whole time I'm telling it. And so she was kind of like, I mean, if that's your bad day, where you still laughed and found joy in that, then that's a pretty good day. So, yeah.
What is your least favorite thing about your job?
um, I would say there are days where I can, you know, I get in the car after school and I just have to like sit there in silence for like 5 to 10 minutes, because I feel like from when the moment I walk into school, sometimes, you know, it's like I said, I get there, contract says 7:50, so I'm there at like 7:45-ish, you know, and I open my laptop, and there's a staff meeting at this time, there's a parent email from, you know, there's an issue, and there's kids who are emailing me saying like, hey, I turned that assignment in, I swear, you know. And so it's just kind of throughout the whole day, you never really get to just kind of like breathe and have a moment to yourself. I hear my name, Mr. Baker, Mr. Baker, you know, 100 something times a day, 100 something times an hour. So I think there's times where I just really need to like, let me decompress in my car. Let me, you know, if I'm driving, maybe I'm going to the gym, so I'm looking forward to that, or I'm just going to play my Taylor Swift really, really loud in the car and sing way too loud and way too awfully, but where I just need to kind of decompress and de-stress. But I think that comes with every job in some capacity.
Is the most stressful part the time management?
Um, I'd say probably is definitely the time management. And I think also one thing that teachers have like started to talk about, and I think it's kind of like been building. I mean, it's this has always been there's always been a lot of pressure on teachers, but there's also just a worry that like we aren't doing enough, or what more could we do, there's only so many hours in the day. There's always going to be more work to do, but where you have like a situation or a student, or whatever it might be, where you're just like, what could I have done differently or better to have made that, maybe that lesson go better, or maybe when talking with a student and they get upset or things like that. So just always that like kind of underlying pressure in the back of your mind of like, I see 100 and something students a day, and I might be the only adult who is going to talk to them for 5 minutes, and I think that can be a lot of pressure.
Do you ever have anxiety while or before you're making decisions for your class?
I would say not necessarily like about making decisions. Um, but yes, definitely anxiety from just like I said, just the day to day. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of choices being made. There's a study that I don't want to misquote it because I don't remember the exact numbers, but they said that teachers make so many decisions like every hour, that it's like one of the highest careers of like, you're just constantly making a choice throughout the day of like whether it's about a classroom policy, or a student trying to like turn in something, or two students who might be having a disagreement, and how I, as the professional, the teacher in the room, handle that. Is that they're making more decisions than like a brain surgeon or something like that. I'd have to look that up to find it. But yeah, I think there's a lot of anxiety with just like, oh, like I said, getting pulled in a lot of directions at once.
How do you deal with your anxiety when you have it?
So like I said, I'm a big proponent of exercising. I love to go to the gym and I love to work out. I don't love to run, but I do that anyways. And I do know that that helps me. And I'll also say just like spending time with my family, which right now my family is my wife and my dog. We love to get home from school or from work, or whatever, and we will figure out what we're doing for dinner and make that happen and eat, and maybe we like have an hour of work to do each, and then we'll go downstairs and we just watch. We like to watch TV, like a sitcom together. We've worked our way through a few TV shows where we'll watch like 2 or 3 episodes in a night, and then call it a night and go to bed. So
What is your advice on how to deal with anxiety?
I'd say I think there's a lot of different like outlets for people. We talk about stress management, and we did that in our SEL lessons as well. Or sorry, we called them, what do we call them? Our EQ lessons this year that we would do during advisory. Um, where different people, they kind of operate in different ways, and so there's not going to be one catch-all thing to cure or to deal with anyone's anxiety. So being willing to try different things and see what works for you. For example, I have no artistic ability at all, but I know a lot of people, they really like to draw, or they like to doodle, or I like to exercise and run and lift weights. Some people just like to be out and walk in nature. If you want to sit down and read for 20 minutes, there's not going to be one catch-all thing, but just about trying different things, seeing what works for you.
Do you have a gym at your house?
No, not at my house, but I'm a member at a gym that I go to. I go about 4 or 5 times a week. So,
What is it like to be a teacher?
I would say it is probably one of the coolest jobs in the world. But also I know that with that there comes, like we've talked about, a lot of pressures and a lot of stresses. But I also kind of think that at times, like there's a lot of people counting on me, whether it's your adults at home or even just the students themselves who are counting on me to give them and to help prepare them for the next grade, for the next whatever, to kind of build those skills for them to have a successful future. Um, so I would say it is a really, really, really great job, but it comes with a lot of hard work, and it's not for everyone. But that's okay. Yeah.
What are some trainings you have to be a teacher?
So I went to a 4-year college where basically it was a 2-year program. So a lot of times in college, you'll do when you're getting your undergraduate degree, you'll take we call them gen eds, where it's like everyone has to take up at least up to this math class, or everyone some colleges you need to do one foreign language, you need to do whatever. So my first 2 years I was doing kind of like the before I got into my program, I had to do a lot of classes to like get into that program. So I think my college did a really great job of like we every person, whether it was middle school or if it was a high school person or an elementary or a pre-K or whatever, um, we had to do a bunch of different classes about I'm trying to think of like multiculturalism. We had to do classes on a lot of common types of whether it's like disabilities or just learning, like just extra learning things for students. We talked about how to write what's called an IEP or a 504 plan for students. Um, and then once you get into the program, you had to do a lot of student teaching. So before I even did my what a lot of people consider like student teaching, where they do it for the whole year, I had already been in 2 or 3 classrooms at that point, like where I was in one building for it was a combined 5th and 6th grade math and science STEM classroom, and I was there twice a week for a semester. I was at another place where I was basically a tutor for students. I was in a science classroom for a semester, and then I finally got into my full year of student teaching, where it started by you had to be there for you had to be there. What was it? It was just like Tuesday, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, I think, and I had normal college classes not during those times. And then the second semester of school, like the year I graduated from college, I had to be there full time. I was basically a teacher being there the entire time, which I think gave me a lot of insight as to what the job requires and what that looks like. Um, which was really great because as much as you can train and you can see different things in different scenarios, nothing really will beat being there, being in front of everything, and like being in front of students and living that lifestyle.
Who is your favorite person to work with?
Well, I'd probably say my wife because, I love her dearly and we're a great team. But if I were thinking about like at school, like where I worked this past year, we have a great math department, and I loved everyone in that department who I got to work with. But I'd say Miss McCormick, who I kind of talked about, she ended up being my mentor teacher. But beyond that, probably one of my like best work friends, where she does special education math, and so we actually taught a class together. We taught 2 classes together in 2020 2021, where we had a higher number of special education students in the classes, but we taught the class together. So I was able to teach and she would kind of be floating around and helping students, or vice versa, where she would teach the lesson and I would be working with small groups. And we made a really, really good team. We worked really well together.
What's your favorite grade or grades to teach?
I always have said so at West Bloomfield, we're a 6, 7, 8 middle school. And I loved getting to work with 6th graders because then I would have them as a 6th grader, and then I would get to know them over the next 2 years. Like after my year of working with them, they were in the building for 2 more years, and I'd get to see them around. I'd get to see them grow up. Um, as opposed to if in our building, a 6, 7, 8 building, where if you teach 8th grade, you might have heard these students' names, over the years, good or bad. And then you have them for that year and then they're gone, they're off at the high school. So that's one thing I'm really excited about at my new school at South High School. I'll be teaching 7th grade again. Well, not again, but I'll be teaching 7th grade, which is the first grade at this building. So I get to see them as 7th graders. And then in theory, I get to see them for the next 5 years after that. And I get to watch them continue to grow up and become, young adults, which is a really, really cool position to be in.
What are you working on right now?
Right now I am catching up on sleep. I'm taking a nap a day. I'm sleeping in. I'm relaxing right now, if I'm being honest, Max. Like I said, we did a year's worth of work in those 9 months, and I am enjoying our time off. My schedule is pretty much wake up about 9 o'clock-ish. That's usually when my wife is leaving for work. I'll take our dog on a walk. I will go to the gym. I'll do some random chores, maybe take a nap, and then kind of read or just hang out until she gets home. And then we figure out what we're doing for dinner, and we go from there. So right now I'm just relaxing.
What are your hobbies?
I would say I love to read, as I kind of mentioned earlier. I love to read. I love to work out. Uh, and I also love, so as I think we've talked about it before in person, Max, I love TikTok. I like to go on there and post a funny little video, and just, yeah, just kind of, like I said, hang out, lounge. My wife and I, we love to watch TV together. And then we also are really big trivia people. If like a restaurant will have trivia, we love to do trivia. You remember, yeah, you came to my classroom. Yep. So we love to do trivia. So actually what I'll do too, is I also make trivia rounds for my family. So like we're all going to be together this weekend for the 4th of July. So I'll have two trivia rounds that my family will be split into random teams, and then I'll be the host and they'll text me answers. And it's a really fun way to spend time together as well.
What is your career history and roles?
So really, I just right out of college, I became I was a teacher. So I've been teaching for the past 4 years. I'm about to start my 5th year. But during high school, it just was kind of like high school jobs. I was actually, sorry, college. I was a college cheerleader at Ohio State. My wife and I both were. That's how we met each other. So we would cheer for Ohio State football games, Ohio State basketball games, which was a really, really cool community to be a part of. And then I also like have coached at gymnastics and cheerleading gyms as well. Um, and before that, when I was a high schooler, my career, I guess my side job is better description of it. I was a lifeguard for I think 3 or 4 years, which was actually a class that my high school offered to get your license for it. And then that was my summer job, which was really, really fun.
What is your education?
So I have my high school diploma from Livonia Churchill High School, and then I went to Ohio State and I got a master. Um, my licensure is for middle childhood math and science. Um, and then from there, I did just do my master's this past year. So I have a master's of science in curriculum and instructional design, and that's from Western Governors University.
And then why are you leaving WBMS going to Ohio?
Yeah, so this was kind of always in my wife and I's like long-term goals. We went to school here in Columbus, Ohio, and Columbus is a really, really cool city. It's an awesome city. It's growing. There's a lot of different types of people as well, which we love. Um, and so it was always my wife just graduated from Michigan State with her PhD in sports psychology. So she's a doctor of sports psychology. And so it was kind of always our long-term goal that she would be a professor here at Ohio State. And we made that goal become a reality. Well, not we, she did all the hard stuff. So we kind of, I knew coming in when I interviewed with West Bloomfield, I said that to Miss Hughes and Miss Graff. I said, my wife's here for 4 years to get her PhD. Once she's done with that, I would love to stay here, but also we don't know what the future holds for us. And they were like, okay. And so here we are 4 years later, and we're back in Columbus. So
I would like to thank you for joining. I had so much fun and good luck in Ohio. We'll miss you in West Bloomfield schools, but good luck.
thanks, Max. I appreciate
You're
it. Best of
welcome.
luck in high school.